Hi, I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. We started tonight's meeting, this afternoon's meeting, with a joint meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now, this was incredibly useful. It lasted about 3 hours. We started out in executive session discussing some specific legal matters related to zoning and the comprehensive plan. And then in open meeting, it was in the training room, not on the council dais because there were too many of us, council and P&Z. We had a group meeting where we reviewed various aspects led by members of city staff about zoning, how it pertains to the comprehensive plan. We had group exercises such as, here's a zoning request, evaluate it for conformance with the comprehensive plan. And we also had an exercise in documenting the findings. This is due to a recent ordinance we passed that are required now by both planning and zoning and council if we approve a zoning request that does not conform to the comprehensive plan in some way. So this is incredibly useful, and I opined to the city manager that I think we should have this after every election when we seat new planning and zoning commissioners and of course new council members. And even if there are no changes, I learned new things, and I can imagine if I did this every year, I would learn new things every time. So in the council meeting, we did have a couple of discussions during executive session. As you know, I can't talk about those. We had nothing particular on the preliminary open meeting agenda tonight because we allotted additional time, more time, for the joint meeting with planning and zoning. In the regular meeting, we had not a very long discussion, but what I think was the most consequential toward the end, and of course I'll speak about that at the end. We had an oath of office for Jenny Zeilfelder for the Retirement Security Plan Commission. Congratulations, Jenny. Consent item B was pulled off the agenda by Councilman Grady. This was for the Memorial Park Donor Recognition Plaza. Councilman Grady pulled this off in order to give recognition to the city staff. He and former council member Tom Harrison had brought this up some years prior for Memorial Park to offer paving stones, basically bricks, in a walkway that donors could purchase to recognize veterans. Some 8,000 paving stones to be laid. And Councilmember Grady did note that there were 4 residents of Plano who were on the Vietnam War Memorial Wall, and he graciously offered, with the permission of those families, to pay for the bricks to recognize those 4 fallen service members in the Vietnam War, where Councilman Grady served. Item L was also pulled off the consent agenda because it wasn't ready yet. This was an amended economic development agreement for Maui Foods. This was pulled and will undergo further review and discussion with staff. So to give you a little insight, we have passed a number of restated economic development agreements in the past year or so, simply because the nature of corporate work has changed and the dynamics, the reality in which we entered into some of these economic development agreements initially, which many of which required so many people to be physically located at a facility or in an office, leased office space for a certain amount of time. That was all prior to the pandemic hitting and the nature of remote work upending. So that was pulled, it'll come back. We had a review of the Juvenile Curfew law. So this is an ordinance that by Texas state law, we have to review every 3 years to determine if we want to continue it or modify it. So we have a curfew law that juveniles can't be out and about between the hours of 11 p.m. and I think 5 a.m. And then between midnight and 5 a.m. on weekends. We did extend that, or I should say we renewed it. We didn't extend the time periods involved, but we renewed it, and we will, by state law, have to revisit it again in 3 more years. And then we had, most consequentially, we had a discussion about the K Avenue Lofts. We did approve a change to the downtown Plano Public Improvement District. Then we have the discussion about the K Avenue Lofts. This is the proposed affordable housing development at the corner of K Avenue and Park. So if you've been following me a while, you know I always use air quotes when I say affordable housing because 2 things get conflated. One is the concept of housing that is affordable, and the second is taxpayer subsidized housing. The two get used interchangeably, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not, but I never say just affordable housing without the air quotes. I say either housing that is more affordable, or I say taxpayer subsidized housing. So this project in particular came before us about a year and a half ago, and there was an offer to purchase the land at the corner of K Avenue and Park. Right now it's mostly undeveloped. There's a Discount Tire on it, on the very, very corner. And we said, well, okay, before we accept this offer, we want to put this land out for bid. So we want to see what kind of offers we get, because for the 20 some odd years the city had owned the land, we'd received a small handful of offers. And since we weren't actually soliciting offers, it's no wonder. So we put it out for bid. We got several offers back. The entity which had made the original offer, which was the Plano Housing Authority, came over the top, and we ultimately sold that land for $2 million. So after selling that, we sold the land, then the actual development project and the rezoning came back before us. That got approved. I was personally against that, but it got approved, and that's ancient history now. And then the sale was to the Plano Housing Authority, and the Plano Housing Authority, as a nonprofit entity, a public facility corporation, was going to own 99.9% of not only the land, but also the improvements, what got built there. This was so that they could pull as a nonprofit entity, pull the entire property, all 200 some odd multifamily units, off the public tax rolls, so pay no property taxes. Now, the development will actually be developed by a for-profit developer. The apartments will be built by a for-profit developer and managed by a for-profit company, but owned by the Plano Housing Authority, and so nobody has to pay any property taxes. So that happened, and then that development project, K Avenue Lofts, came back before council requesting authorization or approval to apply for an 8% housing, I think it was an 8%, 4 or 8% housing tax credit through the state of Texas. Now that's not directly related to property taxes, but it is paid for by the taxpayers. And that got approved. So there are already numerous levels of taxpayer subsidization for this development, which hasn't even broken ground. And then they came back tonight wanting inclusion in the TIRZ 2. The TIRZ stands for Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone. Basically, there's a geographically defined area extending from pretty much along K Avenue to the east and the west, out to roughly 75 and out to Jupiter, with some funky lines in the geographic boundaries. That's from George Bush all the way up past Parker. So it's a fairly lengthy area. Everybody within this area pays taxes that will go into the TIF, tax increment financing. So taxes get paid in the tax increment reinvestment zone, and then that allows extra money to be put into tax increment financing for applicants. In this case, they wanted over $1.6 million of TIF funding for the K Avenue Lofts project, adding another $1.6 million to the total of taxpayer money and subsidies that would be going toward this. As I have spoken about before, and as I opened this segment with, I have an inherent problem with taxpayer subsidization of housing. Housing is a need that everybody has, and government has a unique place in that nobody can protest what we're taking in taxes. You either got to pay your taxes or you go to jail. And the use of those taxpayer funds are meant to be for public use, things that require public participation, public safety, police and fire, foremost among those at the city level, common infrastructure at the municipal level, at the federal level, military, and that sort of thing that accrues to everybody's benefit. Nobody questions that those in need of housing that is affordable will benefit from taxpayer subsidies that reduce the cost of their rent or pay utilities, whatever the money is going toward. Nobody questions that it will be beneficial to them and that they will be helped. But that's not the point in my mind. The point is who's paying for it. I firmly believe that our faith institutions and our nonprofits who get their money by choice from people who willingly give it to them to further a mission or a goal or a cause, that's who should be providing these subsidies, full housing, anything of that sort. When the government does it, it's using money taken under the threat of force from taxpayers and giving it to the specific benefit of individuals, not the public at large. So this is a topic and a battle of philosophies over what is the central function of government. Is the central function of government, as I have stated and I believe, to secure our rights and to provide for safe and orderly society, which is to secure our right to liberty and to be unmolested by the predations of others? Or is the role of government to help people? I do not believe that it is. So this is something that crops up semi-frequently, even at the city council level, and certainly at the state and federal levels. But it ultimately passed, so they will get that $1.6 million of public financing to go towards several things. And don't get me wrong, what it's going toward is not like countertops, but it's going toward a $100,000 art park, some fire code specifications, sidewalks. But these are all things that were going to have to be paid for anyway, and which the developer knew would have to be paid for and had planned for that in the financing. And it's things that any other development project is going to have to pay for, regardless of whether they are the beneficiary of any public financing or taxpayer financing. So that's all we had tonight. This topic, you can bet, is going to come up again, or this battle of philosophies, and I will speak to it more then. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. Good night and God bless.